Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Kidney Coach YouTube channel. I am Fiona Chin, qualified naturopath and co-founder of Cargenesis and the Kidney Disease Solution. And I'm joined today by the beautiful Emily Cahill. Emily is a registered nurse. She works in a big cardiovascular unit here in Melbourne, Australia. She's also a qualified naturopath with a special interest in kidney disease and oncology and all things cancer. And Emily is a part of our Kidney Coach team. She will be answering emails. If you have any questions about supplements, she writes half of our blog posts. She writes all of our Facebook posts. And she is also the only qualified Beat Kidney Disease Solution practitioner, protocol support practitioner, whatever word it is that we use out there in the world. She's the only one that Duncan and I sat down and went through the whole program with, and has trained and who is qualified to actually help take people through the program. So Emily, thank you again for joining me today. It's always great to have you on here and have your wealth of knowledge. And so I think today we both decided we wanted to talk about all things melatonin, because it's not one that gets talked about much in kidney disease. And yet it's one that has got some amazing therapeutic effects. And if people have got insomnia and all sorts of bits and pieces, they may have heard of it, but they may not know of its roles in antioxidant and everything else that melatonin does. So I wanted to delve in that today, and maybe that's something that might be useful for some people out there if they've got questions about melatonin. So why don't we just start with an overview of what is melatonin? What is this? Is it a hormone? Is it a chemical? Where does it come from? What part of the body just produces it? Is it only in a pill? Do we make it ourselves? Why don't we start there with it all?
So melatonin is a hormone, and it's produced by our pineal gland, which is in our brain. It's down there somewhere.
And pineal gland.
Oh, yes, of course. Pineal gland. I know. And so, yeah, it's made in I'm going to say pineal because I don't like pineal. The pineal gland from serotonin. So serotonin is one of our neurotransmitters. So it gets converted from serotonin into melatonin, and we release it in response to light and darkness. So traditionally it's known, and often only known, for its role in sleep. So melatonin is our sleep hormone, if you want to call it that. And what that means is that during the day, while we're awake, our melatonin levels drop. And then as we're getting closer to the evening, what should happen, and when we're starting to be exposed to more darkness, our melatonin levels rise. And that's when we release most of our melatonin, which helps us feel sleepy and fall asleep, and then helps us stay asleep during the night as well. So I would say generally when it's prescribed, and probably every time I've seen it it's prescribed to help people with sleep, and that's often the only thing it's used for medically.
That's how I see it too. And interestingly, in the US, you can buy it over the counter, and finally in Australia, in the last month, you can now buy it over the counter. It used to be prescription only, which is exciting.
Only if you're over, what is it, 65?
I did not know that caveat. I thought,
yeah,
I've got people that have bought it anyway. Really? Only 65?
Yeah, I think it was 60 or 65 pharmacists can dispense
Was
it.
that due to the menopausal issue, or was that just, why did they make that up? Do you know why?
Yeah, I don't know why.
I won't make things up. Okay, please continue.
Yes, so as well as being something that we produce in the body, it is something that can be taken as a medication or supplement. So we can take melatonin, as Fee said, in the US and some other countries, you can just buy it over the counter or online. And then in Australia and some countries, it's prescription only. So you need to get a script from your doctor and purchase it that way. So traditionally, as I said, known for its role in sleep, given to people to help them fall asleep. But research has now shown that it's actually got way more actions than what we probably ever knew or ever really realized. And it's now being researched and shown to be beneficial in cancer, things like heart disease, diabetes, dementia, and kidney disease, which is obviously why we're talking about it today. And really, that a lot of those benefits and actions are to do with the fact that it's a really strong antioxidant.
Let's reiterate that. Sorry, it's a very, very powerful antioxidant. Like, it's one of our most. Yeah, I would put it on par with superoxidized.
Yeah,
it's that powerful. Sorry, Em, I just wanted to say
yes,
how powerful antioxidant it is.
Yeah, that's right. So, so antioxidants, the role in the body is that they clean up or scavenge things called free radicals. And free radicals are something that we make in the body. It's something we get from the food that we eat. And it's normal to make free radicals, and it's normal to have a degree of what's called oxidative stress in the body, because it actually is necessary for some functions. It becomes problematic when we either make too many of these free radicals, so too much of this oxidative stress, or we don't have enough antioxidants. So we're not able to clear up the damage. And oxidative stress goes hand in hand with inflammation. So high levels of oxidative stress also cause inflammation. Inflammation causes high levels of oxidative stress. And both of those things are potentially damaging for the body, potentially damaging for the kidneys, and for the rest of our organs, basically.
It's amazing just how much inflammation is just when we every time inflammation. It's like, what caused this disease? Inflammation. What caused this disease? Inflammation. What's underlying this disease? Inflammation. So, yeah. So, yeah, like you say, it's been such a powerful antioxidant, and that ability to free radical scavenge. Yeah, good old melatonin. So, sorry.
No, you're right. And I always think that when I'm writing blog posts, because I'm like, people must be so sick of me writing about inflammation and oxidative stress, because I'm writing about it constantly.
Images that every time I'm putting blogs in, I'm like, where's my free radical image? Oh, there it is. Goes back in this blog again. Yeah.
So they're, some of the primary actions of melatonin, but other things that it does is that it can help lower blood pressure. Mm-hmm. It helps to stimulate our immune system, so our immune function. Yeah, so a lot of that is also to do with inflammation and oxidative stress. I know, funny that. So inflammation affects the action of our immune system, so it affects the way our white blood cells act. And it can also cause a bit of an imbalance in the immune system as well, where the immune system can become a little bit overreactive to certain things, or it can be a bit underreactive. So it changes the way our white blood cells respond, helps to increase things like natural killer cells, which are important white blood cells for seeking out either pathogens or cancer within the body. It helps with the immune system from a few different ways.
That potentially because melatonin and cortisol act as a bit of a seesaw, do you think it's via that mechanism against cortisol?
Yeah, definitely. I think that would also play a role, and that's a good point. So melatonin and cortisol sort of on a bit of a seesaw if you think about it. So generally, if cortisol levels are high, melatonin levels are going to be low. And if melatonin levels are high, cortisol levels are going to be low. And we see that in what's called our circadian rhythm. So our circadian rhythm is just basically the rhythm of our body. We've got, it affects our sleep, it affects our hormones when they're produced, it affects the way our gut works. So everything in the body works on a particular rhythm. And that's the same with cortisol and melatonin. So in the morning when we wake up, what should happen is that our cortisol levels should be at their highest, and that's when our melatonin levels are at their lowest. because of that balance. And then so that you're able to fall asleep at night, melatonin levels then have to be at their highest, so cortisol levels are at their lowest. But if you have, you know, a lot of stress or really busy and you're making a lot of cortisol, you're then automatically your melatonin levels are being reduced. That's often why people, when they're stressed, can't sleep and can't, you know, fall asleep or stay asleep. And that's because their cortisol levels high, therefore their melatonin's low.
Yes, thank you for going through that, because that's an important thing, because they really do seesaw. So yeah.
So yeah, some of the other things it does, it helps to control blood sugar levels as well, and helps with insulin sensitivity.
Yeah, that's an
So
important
it's,
one. Take us through that. How does it do that?
yeah.
Yeah.
So for this, yeah, it can be really beneficial for people with diabetes, and often they've found that people with diabetes often have lower melatonin levels. They don't really understand why it has the effect on blood sugar and insulin that it does. The science sort of hasn't really worked that out. You know, I guess we could extrapolate a few different things. Again, cortisol and the effect cortisol has on blood sugar and insulin, inflammation, and the way that affects insulin signaling and receptor sites, and blood sugar. So yeah, I mean, it's probably a bit of a wide range of things. And I guess one of the particularly good things about melatonin, so, you know, obviously good that it can lower blood sugar and improve insulin, but it's also been shown to be protective against diabetes-induced damage to the body. So we know that diabetes is the #1 cause of kidney disease, and that we get damage to the kidneys. You know, we also get things like diabetic retinopathy, so damage to the eyes, peripheral neuropathy, so damage to our nerves and things like that to do with diabetes. But melatonin can actually help to prevent and protect that from happening, and also helps to protect our blood vessels from that damage. So remembering that our kidneys are full of little blood vessels, and we've got our arteries and going into our kidneys, that helps to protect all of those structures against our what can be elevated glucose levels in diabetes.
Such an important role, because like you say, diabetes is the leading cause of kidney disease. And again, it's not anything that I'm hearing mainstream talk about is in the role of melatonin. And suddenly it's like, if you're stressed, and because we know this cortisol axis and things like that, it's just like, wow, like melatonin is so important, and hence why sleep is so important, because that's that almost feedback about how well you're operating with your melatonin. It's, yeah, I don't know. It's just amazing that we're not using this more, or seeing again how this melatonin fits into the bigger holistic picture of our health.
Yes, yeah, exactly. It would be nice to see it prescribed for more than just sleep.
Yes.
Keep going. So one of the other actual areas that there is a bit of research, you know, they have been looking quite a lot at with melatonin, is its anti-cancer activities and anti-cancer potential as well. So again, this is largely to do with its antioxidant properties, but it's being trialed alongside chemotherapy and alongside conventional treatment for people with cancer, and showing to improve outcomes, reduce the risk of recurrence as well of cancer. So that's a really interesting area that is starting to become a little bit more known about. And then it also has benefits in terms of cardiovascular disease, can help to lower cholesterol. Again, as I think I mentioned, it can help to lower blood pressure. It's been shown to be protective against heart attack, stroke, atherosclerosis or hardening of the arteries. And studies in animals have shown that it can actually protect the kidneys and the brain against high blood pressure. So again, we spoke about diabetes being the #1 cause of kidney disease, and then we've got high blood pressure being the second highest cause. So yeah, important that it can actually protect against that damage.
Just to go back to the cancer, because that's an area that you have such a special interest in. Are you seeing that being used at all mainstream, or is it something that are you prescribing more melatonin now in cancer, and in what specific cancers, or what would you have to see in a patient, maybe blood wise or symptom wise, that would make you think, maybe I should be thinking about using melatonin in this case?
Yeah. I just thinking, I don't think I've had a patient. No, I have not had a patient who's been with cancer who's been prescribed melatonin by their doctor for their cancer. I do have some who may have been prescribed melatonin to help with sleep, but not for that specific purpose. And yes, it is definitely something that I am recommending more and more, that people go, and again, in Australia, it's prescription only. So go to their GP or oncologist and ask to be prescribed melatonin. Who would I use it for? Look, the studies are pretty widespread in terms of the types of cancers that it's shown to be beneficial for. There is, and again, is this just because there's often more studies in, say, breast cancer than there are in other studies that we're seeing a lot of benefits there, quite possibly. But that's definitely an area where a type of cancer where it has been more well researched. And then also, you know, particularly if someone is having problems sleeping, high stress levels, all of those things that I know means that their melatonin is going to be low, then that particularly would be where I would recommend it. But kind of almost across the board, it's sort of, I think, beneficial. The trouble, I don't know if it's a trouble, the difficulty is, and I don't know if I talk about this now or wait till we're talking about dosage.
Talk about it now.
Talk about it now.
Yeah.
The trouble is that generally dosing of melatonin, so there's no standard, I guess, recommendation for dose of melatonin.
It's quite very individual too, I find.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And this, again, the studies are very varied as to how much has been used. So, you know, anything from like 0.1 of a milligram up to, yes, teeny tiny, up to, I think probably, I have seen studies of 80 milligrams, but that was in particular circumstances. Yeah. But generally for sleep, you know, say the studies generally for sleep are sort of between 1 and 5 milligrams. But the studies for the use of melatonin in cancer are almost all 20 milligrams.
Right.
So there's one of the difficulties is that, particularly in Australia where we need a script for melatonin, the
That's
general...
They won't be prescribing that high dose.
Exactly. So yes, you can get compounded higher doses, but generally we have one brand and that is 2 milligrams. So if I'm wanting someone to take 20 milligrams, then we're talking about them taking 10 tablets. Often doctors obviously are not wanting to prescribe that higher dose. And that's, you know, where we can get into a little bit of difficulty. Now, the difficulty also is that who's to say that 10 milligrams isn't just as effective? It may well be, we just don't have the studies to back it up. So that's where it gets a little bit tricky in terms of people taking melatonin. And again, I'm specifically talking about cancer, you know, just because of that is considered a very high dose, and yeah, it's not necessarily going to be prescribed.
No. You know, thank you for doing that now, because I think that's a big thing to talk about is, you know, a lot of people say I was on melatonin and it didn't work, and you find out what dosage, because I see this in my MS patients because I do use it as an antioxidant in autoimmune disease, and they'll say I'm on like 2 milligrams. I'm like, that's not enough. Like, we need to try different dosages for the qualities that I'm using it for. But it's one of those issues, especially in Australia that you said. So even in the US, I think over the counter, you'll generally see it at 1, 3, 5, and maybe occasionally 10. Yeah, that's the sort of standard in the US that you see. Don't ever see. I've never seen it over a 10 milligram in a health store or anything like that. So, I mean, 20 milligrams is only 2 of those, but still, yeah. So going back to action, so obviously you talked about, it being an antioxidant, anti-inflammatory. I think you were talking about the cardiovascular and cancer sort of stuff. Should we talk about why it's so amazing in diabetic neuropathy and things like that?
Yeah.
Did you want to go anywhere else?
No, that's good. That's a good place to start. So, and I feel like I'm going to keep answering questions in the same way. It's largely to do with its antioxidant actions. Yeah. So diabetic nephropathy and, diabetic retinopathy or peripheral neuropathy is to do with damage of, so we're talking about the kidneys here. So we're talking about damage of the nephrons. So damage because of increased production of free radicals. And because of elevated glucose. So glucose is quite a large molecule that we shouldn't see, shouldn't be filtered into urine. But when glucose levels are very high, the body has a bit of a way of trying to deal with that is actually to increase blood flow through the kidneys. And in doing that, then larger molecules can start to, make their way through the kidney filters where they shouldn't. That causes damage. We know that these free radicals themselves start to damage the nephrons and the glomeruli and the blood vessels as well. And that then causes more inflammation. The body then tries to clean up the inflammation and makes more inflammation. And that's when we start to, see that damage. So if we're able to protect against those free radicals and protect against that oxidative stress and lower the inflammation, then we're going to get less damage to the kidneys or less damage to the eyes or less damage to the nerves. And also it's been shown to help reduce scarring of the kidneys. And again, it's, that similar type process where inflammation and oxidative damage occurs. And then, the body tries to deal with it and we end up with scarring, just like we would if we, cut our arm. So beneficial from a protective point of view, and then also beneficial because it can help to lower blood sugar levels and improve insulin as well. So our lower our blood sugars, the less damage we're going to be causing.
Yeah. Good old antioxidant, anti-inflammatory. And it's amazing, maybe it's now is a good time to say that is the mechanism behind most diseases, and that is the mechanism behind kidney damage, is this inflammation, scarring. The more scarring you have, as Emily mentioned, in the glomerular capsules that are our filtering units, then the body can't filter, which is why we get a backlog. The bun going up and creatinine levels changing, the drop in EGFR and potassium, and all of those things changing is because those glomeruli are damaged through the scarring of everything that happens. So anything that has an antioxidant action is protective, and that mops all of those inflammatory free radicals up is going to slow down and reduce the scarring. Hence your kidneys will function and filter for longer and you'll have better function. So I think a broad statement, just moving away from melatonin for a moment, is anything that you do in your life that is anti-inflammatory and that promotes antioxidant protection, and that may be stress reduction, improved sleep, exercise, all those things are all going to do the same sort of thing. It's just we've got these amazing nutraceuticals and things like melatonin, which is actually a hormone that just does that in such a way if you've overburdened the body. But long term, if you can make sure you live a life of anti-inflammatory, antioxidant lifestyle, you don't have to go down these paths. But you're right, it sits, and the reason we keep saying it is this is the mechanism behind pretty much all chronic disease, including things like cancer and things like that. I digress.
No, that's exactly it. And I guess a couple of things when we're talking about, why is melatonin such a good antioxidant? Yeah. So it's one thing is that it's fat and water soluble. So that means that it can enter and have an effect on all the cells of the body. So a lot of antioxidants are either, not all, but a lot are either fat soluble or water soluble, which means that they are only able to affect fat cells or non-fat cells. But melatonin can do both. It has its own direct free radical scavenger action. So it can play that role in the body where it can mop up, say, these free radicals. But the other thing it also does is that it increases the activity and the production of our body's own antioxidants. So we get antioxidants from food, but we also have antioxidant enzymes in the body which make their own antioxidants, and they're actually far more powerful than anything that we can take as a supplement or from our food. So melatonin actually helps to increase the activity of superoxide dismutase and glutathione peroxidase, and our body can then make more of its own antioxidants.
Yeah, like you say, far more powerful and effective in the body.
Yeah.
And I do find a lot of people with chronic disease and inflammation, it seems to have an effect, and genetics aren't everything. That's a topic for another day, but we see a lot of issues on what I call the NUSFUD genes, the NSFUD genes, and they are responsible for particularly the glutathione production. And then we've got SOD genes, and if you get a lot of inflammation and oxidative damage, that the function of those enzymes that are governed by genetic expression slow down. And so therefore your body isn't able to on its own produce as much superoxidase dismutase or glutathione. And when you have something like melatonin operating within the body in an effective way, it upregulates your own genetic pathways, which is kind of what Emily's saying. And so therefore your body is better able to produce more superoxidase dismutase and glutathione, which are the most powerful antioxidants in the body, self-produced. So it works on the enzyme pathways that are governed by certain genes that can definitely get downregulated by chronic inflammation, stress, and oxidative damage.
Yeah, exactly.
What else? Why? So I guess we've talked about kidney disease and all of those sort of things. So do we need to talk about more kidney disease, or can we talk about maybe some natural ways that we can boost melatonin? Because you can actually boost it, not just taking the supplements.
Yes, we will talk about that just quickly. Talking a little bit more about kidney disease and kidney protection. One of the other things that melatonin does is that it actually lowers the activity of it's called the renin-angiotensin system.
Yeah,
yes. Which is the production of different hormones, so renin and angiotensin, which affects blood pressure. It affects sodium, our body being able to excrete or retain sodium, and also increases the incidence of inflammation and kidney scarring as well. So often people with kidney disease are given ACE inhibitors, so angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitors, or angiotensin receptor blockers to help protect the kidneys. And they're given because of their effect on the renin-angiotensin system. Melatonin has a similar effect on the renin-angiotensin system. So it reduces the activity. In doing that, it reduces the production of angiotensin. Angiotensin causes blood vessel constriction, which increases our blood pressure. It causes our body to retain sodium, which affects our electrolytes and again increases blood pressure. And also contributes to things like inflammation and protein loss in the urine. So, I think it's pretty amazing that it's able to have those kind of actions ACE inhibitors, while they do have beneficial actions, they also have negative side effects and consequences and can sometimes be damaging to the kidney depending on the person and the situation. So here we've got something that's, actually naturally made in our body that has a similar type effect, which is pretty cool.
Now, this may be controversial, but we know in COVID, one of the reasons that people with kidney disease have so increased issues is because of the ACE inhibitor effect. And if people are on ACE inhibitors, it seems to upregulate, and tell me if I've got this wrong, but the way that the proteins from the coronavirus stick and attach, it works on ACE inhibitors. If we're using something like melatonin, and I may be speculative here, there may be no studies, do you see something like an antioxidant like melatonin, being that it works similarly around, angiotensin and all of those sort of things, do you think that may be a protective thing, or do you think there'd be any beneficial role in protecting? Because we want to make sure that our people in our kidney community aren't getting a COVID infection, because we know that potentially there are more risks with that. Would something like melatonin be something that may help mitigate or reduce massive side effects from something like a virus like COVID?
Yes, yeah. And it is something that, that they are studying. And a large part of it is, I think in part to do, maybe to do with angiotensin and the renin-angiotensin system, but I think also a big part of it is the fact that the main reason for the damage that can occur from COVID is to do with what's called a cytokine storm. And it's just massively upregulated inflammation within the body. Again, as we've spoken about, inflammation causes damage, and oxidative stress causes damage. And that's where then we start to see, potential damage to organs and things like that. So the melatonin, by being an anti-inflammatory and being antioxidant, is potentially very beneficial in there, and it has its own benefits on the immune system as well, and can help to upregulate immune function too. So I guess another benefit.
I know it's a bit controversial, but I just wanted to throw it in there to see, because I feel like we want to make sure our kidney coach community is protected, and that might be something that might be really useful. So thank you for talking about the RAS system. That is super important. So how can people, if people are unsure about taking it, or if they're nephrologist or general practitioners and on board, what are some things that we can do to increase it naturally through our lifestyle?
So big things, I guess, to be aware of is to do with your exposure to light. So to make our own melatonin and release melatonin, we need to be exposed to bright light in the morning, and then we need reduced exposure to light at night for the body to actually release melatonin. So if we're on screens all the time, using our phone a lot before bed, watching telly, sitting with the lights on, then we're automatically going to have lower melatonin levels, which is, also why people, are often encouraged to come off screens, before bed. It's because literally it will keep you awake. And that's to do with the way that our retina is exposed to light, which then goes on to affect melatonin production. So that's a really big one. The other thing is, I mentioned that melatonin is made from serotonin. So serotonin being one of our neurotransmitters. So we need other nutrients to help with the formation of serotonin, and then for serotonin to be converted to melatonin. So particularly things like folate and B6 to help make serotonin. We need zinc and magnesium so that we can convert serotonin into melatonin. So if you're low on those nutrients, it's just going to be a reduction in conversion.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are certain foods that actually contain melatonin, or phytomelatonin is what it's called. So increasing intake of those foods as well can help boost melatonin content a little bit. And they're things like Asparagus, berries, Brussels sprouts, cherries. Cherry juice is quite high in phytomelatonin.
And the things that are so good for kidneys, let me think: asparagus, berries, cherries.
Cherries.
Not my glasses on my face.
Yeah, so they'll have a dual action there, but that can also help increase our intake of phytomelatonins, which are just kind of like.
I know that there were foods that contained it, and I definitely know that cherries, because they're my favorite food of all time. So, yeah, there you go. So foods, and it's interesting because of course those foods are so high in antioxidants, especially berries and things like that. And they have that, is it the AORC system of the antioxidants core? And I'm wondering if just melatonin makes up part of that, which is why they score so high on that antioxidant score card.
Yeah.
Food, if you don't know what I'm talking about, foods get rated with how many antioxidants they have in them, and I think it's called an ACOR or
ORAC.
Thank you, ORAC level. And berries and cherries and things like acai and acai berries, and there's others that rank really high. And I just wonder if partly they're ranking so high is because of their natural content of melatonin. Yeah. So having those foods before bed, like stewed berries and something like that, would help people sleep.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that'll help with your own, and obviously lowering stress. So working on stress and cortisol.
That won't help. Stay stressed.
Will then, help with that seesaw and help with increasing melatonin as well.
Perfect. And look, I've written heaps of blogs on how to reduce stress and things like that. Did you mention meditation? Did you say meditation?
I didn't. But that does increase melatonin, as we know.
Yeah. And then I guess anything to, would you say anything that increases serotonin, as being serotonin being the needed amino building block of melatonin, then things that help produce tryptophan and therefore serotonin, they would all help.
Yes.
And I maybe digress here. You see people with serotonin deficiency, therefore will end up with a melatonin issue because they don't have enough building blocks to go towards melatonin. So if we're looking at people that maybe have a bit of depression and things like that, where it is serotonin, a biochemical serotonin deficiency, do you think that then boosting serotonin will also have a long-term effect on improving melatonin?
Yes, yeah, definitely. And one of the common signs or that goes along with depression is problems falling asleep, problems staying asleep, which makes total sense.
It does. I love it when we piece it all together and we're like, wow, just how much sense does this all make? So I know you talked about screen time and things like that, but I guess that's something I want to go back over, because I guess in our modern lifestyles, people are, and my phone's going off 50 million times over here with emergencies, but like people's phones, you're sitting on your phone before you go to bed, you're on these computer screens. If you've got like big screen TVs, they're emitting a lot of blue light, which blocks the body's ability to, because it's the lack of light, as Emily spoke about, that suddenly stimulates melatonin production. So if you've got exposure to a massive amount of light before bed, you're basically shutting down your body's ability to produce melatonin. One of the things that I do, and I've got them on now, and I don't know whether you've got them in yours, but I don't know if you can see it, but these glasses have a slight yellow tinge to them. So I'm always wearing what we call blue light blocking glasses, and that stops the blue light. So if I do watch TV at night or anything like that, I'm always got these on to try and reduce that, so I'm not affecting my melatonin. And I actually have some very dark orange glasses that if I've gone through a stressful period or whatever, I'll wear them at night just so I'm not affecting my ability to go to sleep at night and things like that. So there are other things that if you are a big screen time person or you work a lot, that using blue light blockers and things like that, there's something that you can do to help reduce that blue light, which may stop your body being able to produce its own melatonin. Yeah. And then another great thing to do is first thing in the morning when you get up is to go outside, and you can sit with your eyes closed because it's the pineal gland that you need the sunlight on, is to face the sun first thing in the morning. That helps to reset the circadian rhythm. So that helps to bring up your cortisol levels and bring down melatonin. If you do that every morning for, a week, you'll find that seems to have an on-flow effect in boosting your melatonin before bed. And these are great free things that you can do if you want to try doing that before having to try a supplement or something like that.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point too about melatonin, is that it helps to regulate your circadian rhythm. And the circadian rhythm isn't just about our sleep and wake cycles. It's about how our body works as a whole, and all of our hormones are on a certain rhythm. Our gut and digestion and all of those things work on a certain rhythm. And if your circadian rhythm is out, then God, there's been so many studies about the increased levels of chronic disease in shift workers. So also helping in terms of resetting that will have a flow-on effect as well to the rest of the body.
My poor shift workers. If you're a shift worker with kidney disease, can I make a very blanket statement? You need to find another career, and it's not just the melatonin, it's the stress and all the on-flow effects that everything has with your cardiovascular health and diabetes. Big need to switch something there if you're really serious about healing. Sorry, that's Duncan calling me, the founder of the program here. Time to go away. We're doing videos. Thank you for saying that, Emily. So, are there any issues with taking melatonin? Are there people that shouldn't take it?
There's seems to be a little bit of discrepancy in terms of whether taking supplements of melatonin affects endogenous production. So I've seen research that says it doesn't, but then I've also seen papers that say it does. So I think it's just something to be aware of. And for that reason, particularly if someone's taking higher doses of melatonin, I wouldn't ever recommend that they just stop it. I think a weaning process is helpful in those situations. So, if there has been a reduction in the body's own production, which I guess makes sense, I think if we're giving the body more of something, it'll reduce its own production of it. But I guess in terms of thinking about coming off it, just be aware that it may be better to wean to come off it as well. And then these definitely aren't reasons for people not to take it, because we've spoken about all the benefits, but just being aware that if you're on medication that lowers your blood pressure or lowers your blood sugar, because it has blood pressure lowering and blood sugar lowering effects, just to monitor that if you were to start taking melatonin. And there is, again, this is a bit of a theoretical potential risk, and I'm not sure of the actual mechanism of action, but there is a theoretical concern about melatonin increasing the risk of bleeding when it's taken alongside blood thinning medication. So just something, again, to be aware of. Doesn't mean that people on, I have a lot of patients on blood thinners taking melatonin, but something to be aware of, and maybe just be a bit more conservative with the dose.
Yeah, and I guess dose, we spoke about dose earlier, but I think melatonin's one that I think I probably recommend you do work with a healthcare practitioner, because the dosage range really is so big. And I think, like I say, for kidney disease, 1 to 3 milligrams maybe, but because it seems to be, in my case, I don't know if you find this, very individual. I have to, especially if I'm working with sleep, like one person, 1 milligram will work, the other I've got patients at home, and especially in menopausal women. And I know I've seen studies on, you have to be careful with dosing around menopausal women. I find I have to use a higher dose to get, because often menopausal women stop sleeping, and I find I'm having to use up to 10 milligrams in my menopausal women to get an effect with melatonin. Often doctors may have prescribed it and it's not working, and it's just because the dose isn't high enough. But you do have to be careful with it does seem to then play into how the hormones work. And I have women that suddenly start bleeding again and things like that. So it obviously works in with that. So I'm always a bit careful. But I think melatonin's one, especially in Australia, to have a good qualified healthcare practitioner that can work with you. You can do blood tests, a saliva spit test will tell you what your melatonin levels are up to. I find all of that quite useful because it is a hormone. We are prescribing a hormone here. It's not like a vitamin C that your body flushes. It's I mean, it is water and fat soluble, but I do feel like this one is probably one best just checked in with a healthcare provider. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, I mean, that's the reason why in Australia it's prescription only, because of all of those reasons.
Yeah. Anything else you want to say about the amazing melatonin?
I don't think so. I think we've covered most of it. Again, just in terms of quality, and again, in Australia, this is different because it's a pharmaceutical regulated medication, but recently they tested a whole lot of melatonin products that were bought over the counter in the US, and there was massive variances between what was on the label and what was actually in the medication. So again, just making sure you're getting it from a brand that is reputable and tests, and cheaper in this case is not better.
No,
in any case generally, but
on any occasion. If you want two good brands that I trust, Solgar, which you can buy online on iHerb. They do like little suck lozenges. They seem to be quite good, and they do up to 10 milligrams. And Thorn. Thorn I can highly recommend because I know the quality of their testing. And they do, I think, a 5 is the highest they go. They do a 135, and Solgar does a 1,510 or 1,3,510, something like that. So Solgar seems to be a pretty good brand as well. They're the two that I know if you're looking to try it through iHerb or something like that would be okay. But yeah, definitely worth checking quality. That's vitamins ain't vitamins just because they say so on the bottle.
Yes.
Excuse me. Well, thank you, Emily. I'm glad we spoke about melatonin because it just has, like I say, everybody knows it for sleep, but it's got so many other amazing qualities. So it's good that people know about that. So if you are thinking about it, it is one I suggest you check in with a healthcare practitioner. If you're doing our kidney disease solution program and you want to know if melatonin might fit in with your drivers, feel free to, I can put the link in below. You can contact Emily and have a consult with her, and she can check that for you. And see if that might be something that's worth putting into the program or not. If you're curious about the Kidney Disease Solution Program, head over to our website, www.kidneycoach.com, and you'll find a wealth of free information on there. There's an article, I'll put the link below, all about melatonin if you prefer to read. There's a whole pile of other articles that Emily and I have written and Duncan has written on there. Join our Facebook page. We've got a great community on there. Emily's posting really great quality posts every day. That are really great information, and we always get back to everybody. If you write a comment on there, same here. So if you've liked this video, remember to give us a like, hit subscribe, and then you'll get notified anytime a new video comes along. If there's anything you want Emily and I to talk about, or if you want me to get any other guests on, let us know in the comment section. I read those all the time. Emily, thank you again for your information and sharing with our tribe. Hit like, hit subscribe. We'll talk to you next time, and thanks for being part of our community. We really value and appreciate you guys, and we really hope this information helps. Bye.
Bye.